Why does everyone hate Golden Knights goaltender Adin Hill? What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, the Golden Knights have a serious goaltending problem. Plus, the Raiders seems like they're zeroing in on who their head coach will be. And can UNLV actually win a big game with New Mexico in Las Vegas? Did you know the Golden Knights have the third worst save percentage in the NHL this season? It's not good. Here we go. Adin Hill, come back from injury, and he hasn't been any good. He played 5 games earlier in the year, got hurt, missed a whole bunch of time, and now he's been back and has played in 4 more games. So in his 9 games played, he has an .855 save percentage. There are 72 goalies in the NHL that have played at least 400 minutes this year. He is dead last in save percentage. Just by save percentage, he's the worst goalie in hockey this season. His goal saved above average is negative 7.77. First point here, it's 9 games. 9 games is a tiny sample size. It is almost always better to go off of the bigger sample size. Players get older and they start to decline. That's a bad time to do this, but Adin Hill is not 37. Adin Hill is 29 years old. He's played 121 games for the Golden Knights. He has a .907 save percentage, and he's about plus 17 in goal saved above average in his regular season career with Vegas. That sample size should be more indicative of what Adin Hill is. That should be what he's more like, not this .855 save percentage and a negative 7.8 goals saved above average. But my main question on Adin Hill is not so much about is he going to be the worst goalie in hockey? It's more about how the front office needs to evaluate the goaltender position. Because when do we see good Adin Hill? And do the Golden Knights need to do something at this position? Because again, they have the third worst save percentage in the NHL. And the 2 goalies that they have tried to make or want to have be the number 1 goaltenders, Carter Hart and Adin Hill, have the worst 2 save percentages of the 4 goalies they've used. Akira Schmid's been a perfectly fine replacement level type of goalie, perfectly fine as your backup, and then Carl Lindbaum's played more than I think anybody wanted to, and he's actually got better numbers than Adin Hill and Carter Hart. Again, it's all small sample size here, but it's been a disaster of a position for Vegas. No one's been good there, and the problem that you run into if you're Kelly McCrimmon in this front office is the lack of games to evaluate. The Golden Knights play 11 more games before the trade deadline. The trade deadline's not till March, but we get the Olympic break, which wipes out 3 weeks. So there are only 11 more games. And Hill has been rotating pretty much 50-50 with Akira Schmid. So with 11 games left, do we only see 6 more starts from Adin Hill before the trade deadline? Is that a big enough sample size to know anything about Adin Hill? Because it's only 9 games this season, and it's only 4 since he's come back from injury. So let's say, hypothetically, his next 6 games, which will be about half before and half after the Olympic break. What if he is good? Do you just say, all right, he's good, right? He's got a .912 save percentage, and he's plus 3.2 in goals saved above average in these 6 games, 6 starts before the trade deadline. Is that enough to feel confident about it? And also, what if he's still bad, right? You then would have a 17-game sample size of the whole season if he's still bad to say, wow, he's been bad for 17 games. Again, that's not a big sample size, but it's decent as far as a single season goes. And then I think the bigger problem is, what if he's just kind of below average? He's got 6 more starts. What if he's got 2 really good starts in there, 2 kind of disaster starts in there, and then a couple of starts that are just sort of okay, just average, maybe a little below average? What do you do then? Because then you don't get any clarity in the last 6, and you combine it with the first 9 that he started, and he hasn't been good. It's just, there's not going to be a big sample size on Adin Hill for the front office to make a decision on the goaltender position. And the way that he's played so far is not good enough for a team that wants to win the Stanley Cup. That's no doubt. That's the reality. The way Adin Hill has played already is not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. But we've seen Adin Hill play much better than this in the regular season. Again, it's over 120 starts, and he's got good numbers. We have also seen Adin Hill be the best goaltender in the playoffs when the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup. So we've seen him do it in the postseason, in the biggest moments. By the way, because I looked this up yesterday, since the Golden Knights joined the NHL, the best goals saved above average by a goalie in a postseason is Adin Hill the year they won the Stanley Cup. That since this team has existed, the best goaltending performance that we have seen in the playoffs is Adin Hill. So we've seen him do it in the postseason. Now, granted, that was a couple of years ago now at this point, but like, it's just, I don't know what you do as the front office. And this is an organization that is always going for it, right? That they're the organization that's willing to take a chance on Carter Hart and all of the criticism that they got for that because they thought it might help them win, right? That's this organization. So can they just sit back on the goalie position and count on Adin Hill playing better? Right? I don't know. And this is part of the reason why I think the Rasmus Andersson trade was probably not the best move, because I think you throw center position in there as well, but I don't think it's the first or second biggest need of this team. And they gave up probably their best assets to make something happen. Again, Pavel Dorofeyev, in theory, would be a really good asset to trade away if they wanted to make that type of move. But I don't know that Rasmus Andersson was the best move for what this team actually needs. So I am fascinated to see what they do at this position, because you're just not going to be working off a bunch of information to make a good, sound decision, to really have confidence that Adin Hill is good, is back to being who he has been most of his Golden Knights career, or if Adin Hill is bad and not good enough to get the job done for the Golden Knights. So that's a really big question, because, and by the way, the other part of this is that if Carter Hart comes back from injury, you then have Adin Hill, Carter Hart, and Akira Schmid. Are you going to carry 3 goaltenders? Probably not. So can you even trade for another one at that point? You'd have to get rid of at least one of those guys. I guess if Hart's out for the rest of the year or something, or Akira Schmid or Adin Hill gets hurt, which, it's hockey and it's the goaltender position for the Golden Knights. So that's very likely that happens. But like, there's enough names there that it's not just, oh yeah, we can just go trade for a goalie. You would then have to do something else with goaltender. So part of me thinks they might just ride it out and assume that Adin Hill gets better, just because it's kind of the easy thing, and it might be the best thing to do, especially after the Rasmus Andersson trade, given that the assets that they no longer have to make a move. The other part of the Adin Hill conversation that I find interesting, why, and I know I do this more than I would like to. I know I am allowing a few people on Twitter to form my opinion on other people's opinions, if that makes sense. And I know I shouldn't do this as much, but I feel like the online criticism of Adin Hill's play is so much worse. The criticism is so much worse than the online criticism of Carter Hart's play. And both of them have horrendous numbers in small sample sizes this year. And I guess goalies typically get a lot of crap from the fan base, but I guess I just don't get why Adin Hill's is so significant. I mean, I had somebody on Twitter yesterday tell me that there's no real reason to like respect Adin Hill's playoff run when they won the Stanley Cup, because Laurent Brossoit or Logan Thompson would have done the same thing. You can't say that with a straight face. Again, Adin Hill, by goals saved above average, had the best playoff run of any goalie of any team since this team entered the league. You can't sit there with a straight face and tell me Laurent Brossoit definitely would have done that, or that Logan Thompson would have done that. It's just weird to me that he gets so much criticism, or so much more criticism, than what Carter Hart got for basically the same performances. Hill's after the last game is worse than Carter Hart, but they basically had the same season to start. There's been an injury, small sample size, and they've both been bad in that small sample size. It's very weird to me the way the fan base responds to Adin Hill, given what he has been in his career. To me, the biggest criticism of Adin Hill in his career is he's not healthy. Like he last year he was pretty much healthy the entire season. That was the first time we saw that. The biggest, like, I think if fans were like, okay, we can't trust Adin Hill to be healthy, I think that's a valid thing to bring up because he hasn't been for pretty much every year of his career. But the I guess disrespect of what he's done kind of surprises me since he's the goaltender of the cup winning team. Another part of the Golden Knights that I am curious to see because I get to bring this question back up again. Is this team any good? We've talked about this a lot on this show, mainly because this team goes to overtime all the time, and it doesn't really matter who they play. They've been playing overtime games against good teams, bad teams, average teams, which I have said suggest you're average. If it doesn't matter who you play, that you end up going to overtime, then you kind of suck. That might be a little harsh, but you're kind of average. So is this team any good? Because now we're getting more variance from game to game, but maybe still the same overall result over a bigger sample because this team is back to having more losses than wins, and the overtime losses help there. But if you look at these last month or so of hockey, they lose 5 in a row. They win 7 in a row. And now they've lost 3 of 4. And in the last 3, it was fall behind 4-0 to Boston. They came back and made it 4-3, but they were down 4-0. They were getting smoked through 2 periods. And then hammer Toronto, right? You win that game 6-3. You were all over the Maple Leafs. And then just worst performance of the year, get absolutely annihilated by Ottawa 7-1. Worst loss of the season. That's a wild swing in 3 games. And again, it brings me back to the question, is this team any good? Because you probably shouldn't be losing to Ottawa 7-1, but also smoking Toronto, that's pretty good, right? I know Toronto's not like any sort of top of the league team this year, but that's pretty good. And this is a team that's going to the playoffs. They lead the division, but that doesn't mean they're good, right? Like they would not lead any other division in hockey. They would be outside the top 3 and fighting for a wild card spot in 2 of the other 3 divisions, right? But we're 51 games into this season. And I guess the question is, have they shown you anything that makes you think they can win the Stanley Cup? They won 7 in a row, right? And that was good. I did say there was some good fortune in there because in those 7 games, I think it was 36 goals scored on 20 expected goals. So they were way outperforming their offensive output, but that might be the answer, right? Have they played well enough to win the Stanley Cup? You might point to that 7-game stretch and say, yeah, that was it. And that might be fair. But I just feel like we've gotten so many games or stretches of games where it's just kind of like, I don't know. Like there's some moments, there are some games, but have they strung that together long enough for you to say, yeah, they'll do this for 2 or 3 months in the postseason? I don't know. It doesn't feel like they've shown that, and maybe they will. Maybe we come out of the Olympic break and post-trade deadline, and this team starts playing well, and you can really point to it and say, hey, this is what they look like. But it just doesn't feel like a team that's going to be able to win a Stanley Cup because we just haven't seen them play well enough throughout the year. One last thing on the Golden Knights before they play tonight, still on their East Coast road trip. But Mitch Marner is no longer at center for the Golden Knights, or at least hasn't been the last 2 games. He has been back on the wing. He's played with Hurdle at center and Pavel Dorofeyev on the other wing. So right now, the Golden Knights' 4 centers are Jack Eichel, Tomas Hurdle, Riley Smith, who is a winger playing out of position, and then Tanner Lisinski, who is an AHL player that's been called up because of some injuries to play as a 4th-line center. That doesn't feel like a great center group. That does not feel like a center group that you can win the Stanley Cup with. And Colton Sissons coming back, I don't think changes that statement. So how do you get better at that position? One that we've heard this franchise in years past talk about being the most important position to be good at. How do you get better at that when your 3rd and 4th line centers are guys playing out of position or a guy who is an AHL player? The biggest thing would be if William Karlsson can actually come back. But again, SendBen.Vegas reported last week that there's a chance Karlsson misses the entire season, that he might have to have surgery. There hasn't been an official update from the team, but apparently it's possible Karlsson just never does, in fact, come back, which would be a huge blow to this team's chances to win the Stanley Cup. Because if you insert William Karlsson in there as your 3rd-line center, not to say the 4th line doesn't matter, but Eichel, Hurdle, Karlsson is very good. So if Karlsson comes back, that helps and fixes it and alleviates a lot of this. But in the scenario where Karlsson's done for the year, I don't think they have good enough centers to win a Stanley Cup, because is Riley Smith as a third-line center any good? Is Mitch Marner as a third-line center any good? It doesn't feel like that's going to be the case. And so the rest of these, like, how do you figure this out? Trading for one would be helpful. Like, I don't mind experimenting with Mitch Marner at center, because I think that's the obvious player to try there among your wingers, to try there that could be good at it, right? In theory, Mitch Marner could be good at center. And if he were, okay, Eichel, Hertl, and Marner as your top three centers all of a sudden sounds really good. But if you look at like expected goals and Corsi in the games that he's been at center, it was not good. His lines were not good. So I don't know that it's the answer, but I don't mind trying it, just because you got to try something if these are the options that you have. So that's a spot they've got to figure out and what to do there. If they know as a team, if they know Karlsson is going to come back, then it's much less urgent and it's more about figuring out what works now. But if they know Karlsson's done for the rest of the year, if he's going to have surgery that ends the season or whatever, or has had it, then that makes this an urgent position that, okay, you need to figure it out now, but you need to figure it out now because it's got to help you when we get to the postseason.
Battle Blast, been serving Las Vegas since June 2012 with the very best in family entertainment. We are proud to provide the best facility, equipment, and service possible. Strap on laser tag vests, step into the 5,600 square foot two-story arena designed to look like a worn, torn city street. An exciting atmosphere filled with exhilarating music, blacklight effects, and fog. Battle Blast also features a viewing deck for those not playing can watch players vest up and catch a view of the action going on in the arena. In between games, check out our arcade and prize center and enjoy tasty treats from our snack bar. Birthday parties, sports teams, group outings, and corporate events. Battle Blast does it all. We want to make your Battle Blast experience so good you'll want to return again and again. Battle Blast is the ultimate destination for family fun and friendly competition.
A big thank you to Battle Blast Las Vegas for sponsoring Technically Correct and sponsoring Bischoff's Briefs. If you want to play some laser tag, check out Battle Blast Las Vegas. They're at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, a great spot for a kid's birthday party or a corporate event, anything like that. And a big thank you from me to Battle Blast Las Vegas. They are a reason why I can do this show. I'm going to need sponsors to make this show happen. So I appreciate Battle Blast Las Vegas for sponsoring this show. Again, 8125 West Sahara Avenue, best laser tag in Las Vegas. Maybe I shouldn't stutter through doing their ad read while I thank them. But Battle Blast Las Vegas, your next stop for fun in Las Vegas. UNLV hosts New Mexico tonight. KenPom projects New Mexico to win this game, but only by 6. Not as big of a margin as you might expect from the 46th place team playing against the 121st place team in KenPom ranks. But fun fact for you, if you go by KenPom ranks, the best 4 teams that UNLV plays this season are Alabama, who they played in the Players Era Tournament, and then Utah State, San Diego State, and New Mexico. If you're paying attention, Utah State, San Diego State, New Mexico, that's 3 games in a row for UNLV on their schedule. If you look, Memphis has fallen out of the top 100. They're only 9-10. Stanford does have a good record at 14-6, but they're outside the top 70 in KenPom. Maryland, St. Joseph's, Rutgers, those are all teams that are outside the top 100. So the best teams on UNLV's schedule, outside of Alabama, who's very good, are these Mountain West teams that are going to be in the tournament or at least on the bubble in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. So this is about as tough of a stretch, these 3 games, as UNLV will play all season. I know roster-wise there were some bigger problems like the Players Era Tournament, but as far as quality of opponent goes, this kind of caps off a huge 3-game stretch here. A couple of things. One, what does this crowd look like for UNLV? San Diego State was the best crowd of the year. They announced over 7,000, but they lost the game. And, did that kill off some momentum that was helping to bring some fans back, or does all of that stay? I'm guessing quite a bit of it dies off. It's a Tuesday, not a Saturday. It's an 8 p.m. start, so I'm guessing a good chunk of that actually does die off. However, UNLV and winning this game, they have played their last 5 games. It's been their best 5-game stretch of the season. Bart Torvik has a stat called game score. I appreciate if you listen to the show before and you know what game score is, but basically every single game is ranked from 0 to 100 to just tell you how good of a performance it was. And UNLV's last 5 games have all been above 50. So their last 5 games have all been above average performances. It's the first time this year they've done that, where they've had a 5-game stretch with every single game above 50, which is not great for the season as a whole. Not good, but this is far and away the best they're playing. Even though there were some issues against San Diego State and all of that, this is easily the best they have been playing. So maybe they've got a chance. They're 121st in KenPom. Based on what they've done the last 5 games, they're better than that. But based on what they've done for the whole season, they're not that good, actually. And by the way, for comparison, New Mexico has had just 2 games all season below 50 in game score. They have been a very consistently good basketball team. New Mexico in conference play, best defensive team in the Mountain West. What does UNLV's offense look like against a really good defense? Do they get smothered, or will they be able to knock down some threes? Will they be able to get to the paint? Also on UNLV, I wrote about Tyron Jones. If you want to check that out, it's at my Patreon, patreon.com/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff. There's some bonus content up there. Most recently, it's a story about Tyron Jones. He's probably my favorite player to watch on this team, him and Dre Gibbs-Laughlin. Probably my favorite player to watch on this team, and he's really important to this team. He's their second or third best player, depending on how much you value foul trouble. He's their second or third best player. And the issue, though, is that Tyron Jones, in an ideal scenario, is coming off the bench for a good team. And UNLV's run into a problem where he's super important, but that's an issue because he's not quite good enough. So I wrote about that. There's some Josh Pastner quotes on Tyron Jones where he's talked a lot about what Jones needs to be better at. Pastner, I don't want to phrase this as though he blamed Tyron Jones for the loss to San Diego State, but Pastner, both post-game against San Diego State and when he talked to the media yesterday, brought up multiple times that Tyron Jones' mistakes were a big reason they lost that game to San Diego State. So there's a story on that. Check it out at Patreon. You can support me there. Would love it if we had a whole bunch of Patreon subscribers. William Nylander was fined $5,000 by the NHL for flipping off a camera. The Leafs forward was in the press box during a Maple Leafs game with, I believe it was Colorado, and he flipped off a TV camera, and the NHL fined him for it. 5,000 is the maximum, by the way. We fine him for middle fingers? That's something that just gets universally fined? But my question, though, how does this get fined and not Keegan Colasar ripping a jersey out of a Maple Leafs fan's hand? Because that's worse. Ripping something out of a fan's hands is significantly worse than flipping off a camera. I don't even think that's up for debate. So I still don't understand how Keegan Colasar doesn't get fined for ripping a jersey out of a fan's hands. In the NFL, Mike McDaniel is the Chargers offensive coordinator. The Chargers announced that yesterday. So he wasn't apparently out of the actual running for the Raiders head coaching job, at least based on the way it's been reported. He did turn down Cleveland. He did turn down Buffalo. So it looks like he turned down Vegas. Maybe Vegas said, no, we're not going to hire you, so go ahead and take it. But it does appear as though he turned down 3 different head coaching jobs to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. And this is what I'm curious, does he think that offensive coordinator job is better for his career than jumping right back into a head coaching job? I can understand it for Cleveland. I don't understand it for Buffalo. Because if you told him, hey, you can be the OC of the Chargers or the head coach of the Bills, I feel like head coach of the Bills is a better option. The Raiders is sort of 50-50 depending on what you think of Fernando Mendoza and ownership, right? But in theory, I'm assuming he wants to be a head coach again, right? Maybe he doesn't. If McDaniel just never wants to be a head coach again, take the OC job. But assuming he wants to be a head coach again, is he going to get a better job than Buffalo after a few good years with the Chargers? Probably not. I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. It just doesn't feel like there's going to be many better options than that because you're getting an MVP candidate quarterback in his prime that you could legitimately win the Super Bowl with in year 1. Also, Phillip Rivers pulled his own name out of the Bills head coaching job. Again, why did Buffalo interview him anyway? I don't understand. He's coached high school football. Is there really a thought that you're going to take him straight from coaching high school football to an NFL head coaching position? That's insane. And by the way, Ian Rappaport tweeted out that this might not be the last time we see Rivers interview for head coaching jobs. I don't think he meant this offseason, but in future offseasons. Is he going to coach at a higher level than high school football before that happens? Or am I supposed to believe an NFL team is going to hire a guy straight out of high school to be their head coach? That would be one of the worst head coaching decisions you could possibly make. Also, more bad news for the Browns. Jags offensive coordinator Grant Udinski pulled out of the Browns head coaching position, according to Diana Rossini, which means multiple coaches, I think we're up to 3 now, have said no to the Browns head coaching job. And between McDaniel and maybe Udinski, because he might get a job here, but we might have had multiple coaches pull out that are not even going to get head coaching jobs somewhere else. It's not like, oh yeah, pull it out and he's going to get the Raiders job. They just said no, and they might go back to being an offensive coordinator. The Browns are a disaster. Like, no one wants it. And I think they're right, by the way. I would rather be the OC with the Chargers or the Jags or honestly anywhere than be the Browns head coach, because if you're a head coach, right? Excuse me, if you're not a head coach and you think, if you're Udinski or McDaniel and you think you might get a head coaching job opportunity in the future, it's probably going to be better than the Browns. Right? Like, if the Jags have another good season, Udinski might be a hot name next offseason and get offered a job that's better than the Browns. It just seems like such a terrible job. And by the way, did you see Tom Pelissero on the Rich Eisen show say that Browns are having their coaching candidates take a personality test, write some sort of essay, there's homework assignments before the interviews that they do? Like, it's the least desirable job that's open, and there's homework. Maybe they should hire Phillip Rivers. Shedeur Sanders got named to the Pro Bowl. He had 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and 7 starts. Go Pro Bowl. Drake May had to drop out because he's going to the Super Bowl. Josh Allen, Drake May, and Justin Herbert were the 3 quarterbacks named to the Pro Bowl roster. And I guess everybody else said no. I know there were some injuries, right? Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith would have been a better candidate. Those guys all suffered injuries in season. But like CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence type quarterbacks, did they say no? Like even Aaron Rodgers and Cam Ward, did they all say no? It just seems like Shedeur would have been last on the list of quarterbacks that played football. Who would you have rather had? Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders? Sanders for the headlines, and if we're awarding performance, was Sanders better than Dylan Gabriel last year? In baseball, our soon-to-be Las Vegas A's almost made a trade for Nolan Arenado. So the Cardinals traded Nolan Arenado to the Diamondbacks earlier this offseason. But Ken Rosenthal reported that the A's had a deal in place to trade for Arenado, had a deal in place with the Cardinals. But Arenado had a no-trade clause, and he preferred to go to Arizona or San Diego. So it sounds like Arenado said no to going to the A's. Interesting part here is that Arenado got his salary paid down by the Cardinals, right? Had a lot of money owed left. He hasn't been producing at the level that his salary says. So for them to trade him, they had to pay a lot of that money. Send him to Arizona. So I'm guessing the A's viewed this as, hey, we could get a decent third baseman who might have one more career year in him, and it would be pretty cheap money-wise and trade prospect-wise because the contract's so bad and the other team will pay it down, but it didn't happen because Arenado didn't want to play in a AAA ballpark. Rosenthal reported the A's are planning to use Max Muncy. No, not the Dodgers' Max Muncy. The A's have their own Max Muncy at third base, unless they add a new third baseman. They could sign, I think, is it Eugenio Suarez is the best third baseman that's a free agent? That could be an option if they want to spend some money in free agency. If not, they could trade for a third baseman. We'll see what they actually decide to do. But they did try to trade for Nolan Arenado. So that has been Bischoff's Briefs. I love when we get updates on the A's in the offseason. Bischoff's Briefs is brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Vegas. You can host your next birthday party at Battle Blast. Book the party package and you'll get a private party room, a party host, pizza, soda, arcade tokens, and of course, laser tag. And if your kids play and you're like, wow, I really want to do that, you can add on a game for adults as well, or just book it for your own birthday. It's Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, your next stop for fun in Las Vegas. Are the Raiders going head-to-head with the Bills for their next head coach? So Adam Schefter was on with Pat McAfee yesterday, and he said the Raiders and Bills have the same candidates for their next head coach. Ryan McFadden of ESPN tweeted out that the Raiders finalists for their job are Davis Webb, Clint Kubiak, Joe Brady, and Mike LaFleur. Schefter specifically mentioned Joe Brady and Davis Webb as two names that both teams were after. So can the Raiders beat out the Bills for a head coach? The obvious answer is no, right? Josh Allen exists. The Bills, you walk into legitimately Super Bowl contention because of Josh Allen. You walk into that job and you should be in the playoffs right away. Whereas if you take the Raiders job, the last time the general manager talked to the media, he basically said this is a rebuild and we have no expectations of going to the playoffs next season. So you're probably not in the playoffs in year one, probably not in the playoffs in year two, right? A lot of things have to go right if you take the Raiders job. A lot of things have to go right just for you to get to the level that the Bills are at right now. And a lot of things have to go right that are probably not your control. Drafting has to go well. Free agent acquisition has to go well. Tom Brady and John Spytek have to be good at their jobs. Whereas with the Bills, this team's been a legitimate contender, and have they had a good front office yet? So things don't have to go right for you to have a real chance. However, the Bills did just fire Sean McDermott, and the owner said that he did it because they lost a playoff game to Denver and he saw players crying in the locker room. So there is definitely a chance Bills ownership is bad enough to say, I don't want that job. Unfortunately, Raiders ownership is not necessarily great either, but there's enough there to say, gross. Now, the candidates for the Raiders job. I think this is the right track. All of those names are offensive guys, right? Joe Brady's the Bills offensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak's the Seahawks offensive coordinator. Mike LaFleur's the Rams offensive coordinator. Davis Webb is the Browns QB coach. I don't want to pretend. I definitely will. I don't want to pretend like I know which of those guys is going to be good or bad or better than the others as a head coach. But at the very least, I think the thought process here is correct. They don't need to go defensive-minded head coach. They don't need to go CEO-style head coach. They need the play caller that will make Fernando Mendoza look good. And if you get that right, be together for years. The problem with hiring a defensive-minded head coach, even if he makes a good hire at offensive coordinator, you're probably going to lose that guy in a couple of years if he is really good. If he's your head coach, you're almost certainly not going to lose him to a different job. So that's what I would be doing, and it appears as though that's what the Raiders are doing with their potential for finalist here for their head coaching position. Now, this is where I pretend to know what I'm talking about. Clint Kubiak. He's coaching in the Super Bowl, by the way. Adam Schefter said on the Pat McAfee show that he expects all of these jobs to be filled, all the open ones to be filled this week, potentially by Wednesday, which would, I guess, mean Clint Kubiak is out, right? Jesse Merrick of Silver and Black Network, Sports Network tweeted, sounds like Seattle is pushing hard to keep Kubiak. He may pull a Ben Johnson and pass on this round of openings. At least that's what some reports are suggesting. So I think that would be stupid if you're Clint Kubiak. Turn down a head coach job to stay with Seattle as the offensive coordinator. Ben Johnson did it in Detroit, but he did then leave the next year to take the Bears job with Caleb Williams. But the key here, Ben Johnson didn't lose any shine as the Lions offensive coordinator from one offseason to the next. The offense stayed great, and he was still a top candidate. How confident are you the Seahawks offense is going to be as good as it's been this season, next season? Is it going to be this good? Because I don't think I'd be willing to take that bet if I were Clint Kubiak, right? I don't think that's what I would be doing because it's Sam Darnold at quarterback, and I know they've been good this year. They're in the Super Bowl. But the chances that this Seattle team takes a step back seems pretty high. I don't think any of us are sitting here looking like, oh, they've got an offensive juggernaut coming for years. It seems like they could very easily take a step back to being an average NFL offense, and then all of a sudden, how attractive is Clint Kubiak as a head coach? So yeah, I don't know. And by the way, I have more numbers for this. This is where I pretend to be smart. Clint Kubiak's been an offensive coordinator for 3 years, and it's been at 3 different stops. 2021 with Minnesota, 2024 with New Orleans, and then this past season with the Seahawks. He's only ever had one good offense. In Minnesota in 2021, they were 17th in EPA per play and 14th in points, which is fine. It's a league average offense, but he leaves and the offense was immediately better in 2022. In 2024 with New Orleans, had Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler at quarterback. I think that speaks to this a little bit. But they were 25th in EPA per play and 24th in points, right? That was a bad offense. And then this past year in Seattle, they finished third in points. I was surprised. They were only 14th in EPA per play. So they were not as good on this efficiency metric as I would have expected, but they were a good offense. But that's 3 years as an offensive coordinator in one good season. That's not like screaming of a head coach. That's not Ben Johnson's resume in Detroit, right? So I don't know if I'm Kubiak if I'm taking that bet, because it feels like this is an offense that could definitely take a step back. Also interesting, I don't know if this means anything. Feels like a small sample size. But if you look at EPA per play for the rushing offense, Seattle was just 22nd this year in EPA per play when they ran the ball. New Orleans under Kubiak was 10th. Minnesota was 24th. Is there some real concern that Kubiak doesn't have a great running game when he's the play caller? I don't know, because we've only seen one of his offenses have a good running attack, and it was in New Orleans, of all places. So we'll see how good Clint Kubiak actually is, but it appears as though he's going to go back to Seattle and be the offensive coordinator next season, and we'll see if they can replicate this with Sam Darnold.